The moment I realized my entire life had been built on lies, I was standing in front of 23 broken children, holding a check that would save them from the same fate I thought I'd escaped. And so, on behalf of the Morrison Family Foundation, I said into the microphone, my voice somehow steady while my world tilted off its axis, I'm honored to present this $2 million grant to establish the Hope Harbor Children's Center. The applause felt like it was coming from another universe. These kids, teenagers who'd aged out of foster care with nowhere to go, were getting their miracle, the same kind of miracle I'd believed the Morrison family had given me 35 years ago when they pulled me from the system and made me their grateful daughter. My phone vibrated against my hip, insistent as a heartbeat. I kept smiling, kept shaking hands with donors who saw me as the Morrison family's crowning achievement. Look how beautifully their charity case had turned out. But each buzz felt like a warning, like thunder before lightning strikes. Sarah, my assistant Janet, whispered, appearing at my elbow as cameras flashed, "Your mother's called 4 times. She says it's about Lily's wedding." The wedding, 6 days away. The one day I'd been looking forward to more than Christmas because Lily was the only Morrison who'd ever made me feel like real family instead of an obligation. In my car, hands shaking like autumn leaves, I finally looked at my phone. 3 texts from Mom. "You're not coming to the wedding. Lily's family doesn't want you there. This is final, Sarah." The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath. I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, the face that had never quite matched theirs, no matter how hard I'd tried to belong. For 35 years, I'd been the perfect, grateful daughter. But as I sat there, something shifted inside me, like ice cracking on a frozen lake. "So you chose appearances over family, Mom?" I typed back. Then I opened my laptop and smiled. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. That night, 32 floors above Boston Harbor, the city lights spread out below my corner office like scattered diamonds on black velvet. The Morrison Family Foundation occupied an entire floor of this gleaming tower, a testament to 3 generations of what everyone assumed was philanthropic excellence. But as I stared at the contract cancellations piling up on my screen, a pattern emerged that made my blood turn to ice water. Every single wedding vendor was being paid through Morrison Foundation subsidiaries, not funded by us, owned by us. The florist, the caterer, the string quartet, even the photographer shooting Lily's fairy tale day, all of it flowing through a network so complex it would take forensic accountants months to untangle, which meant I controlled everything. "Janet," my voice barely above a whisper into the intercom, "pull the sealed Chen Industries file from 1999, the one Grandfather Morrison restricted." "Ms. Morrison, that requires board approval." "Janet, I am the board." While waiting, trembling fingers navigated to the Foundation's deepest financial records, the ones Grandfather Morrison had said were "for my eyes only" when the family shows their true colors. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd been preparing me for this moment my entire adult life. What those records revealed made bile rise in my throat. The Morrison Family Foundation wasn't built on philanthropic success. Every dollar traced back to companies the Morrison empire had systematically destroyed, their assets absorbed, their families left with nothing but heartbreak and bankruptcy. 53 businesses over 3 decades, 53 families crushed under the weight of Morrison ambition. And there, in Grandfather Morrison's careful script at the bottom of one ledger, Redemption Fund, $50 million, for the daughters, plural. Janet returned with a banker's box that hadn't seen daylight in decades. Inside, newspaper clippings yellow with age, legal documents, and a photograph that stopped my heart cold. A man who shared my eyes and cheekbones stood beside a little Asian girl in a playground. Someone had written on the back, James and Sarah Chen, 1991, last day together. James Chen, my father. The newspaper clipping told one story: successful businessman commits suicide after embezzlement scandal destroys his biotech company. But the medical examiner's report, tucked beneath it, told another, and Grandfather Morrison's handwritten note told a third. Truth, witness protection, JC relocated. Subject must remain unaware until sufficient strength achieved. My father was alive. The realization hit like physical force, doubling me over in my leather chair. Everything I'd grieved, every therapy session spent processing abandonment, every night I'd wondered why he'd chosen death over fighting for me. All lies. My phone rang, Mom's name flashing like an accusation. Sarah, what have you done? The caterer called saying their contract's void. Lily's beside herself. The Whitfields are asking questions about payment sources. Mother, the word came out steady despite my shattered world. Tell me about James Chen. Silence stretched like a taut wire between us. I don't know what you're talking about. My biological father, the man whose company Dad destroyed before adopting his daughter as some twisted trophy. The line went dead. Fingers flying across my keyboard, I searched the Foundation's adoption records. What I found made my chest constrict with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. Emma Morrison Clark, London. Isabella Morrison Santos, Miami. Grace Morrison Kim, Seattle. All adopted by Morrison family members. All daughters of businesses destroyed by our empire. All around my age. All successful women who probably had no idea they were sisters in tragedy. Before courage could abandon me, I crafted identical messages to all three. This might sound impossible, but I believe we share more than just adoption into the Morrison family. It's about our fathers, our real fathers, and what was taken from all of us. Send. Within minutes, my phone rang. Emma, calling from London, her British accent thick with emotion. Sarah, oh my God, we've been looking for you for years. The Boston daughter. There's so much you don't know. What do you mean? Lily's wedding isn't just about status. Marcus Whitfield's firm is about to acquire Chen Industries, your father's company that he rebuilt under a new name after they thought they destroyed him. They're finishing what they started 20 years ago. The room spun around me. Emma, I think our fathers might be alive? We know. And Sarah, they've been planning something big. My computer chimed with an email from an address I didn't recognize. J. Chen, 1963. Subject line, time to come home, little star. The email from my father contained just one line. Starbucks on Newbury Street, 1 hour. Come alone, little star. Little star. The pet name hit like a physical memory. Warm summer evenings, someone pushing me on a swing, a voice singing lullabies in a language I'd forgotten I once knew. Tears blurred the screen as pieces of a buried childhood surfaced like fragments of a sunken ship. Within 30 minutes, video calls connected me to 3 women who looked like echoes of myself. Emma's London office backdrop couldn't hide the exhaustion in her eyes. Isabella's Miami penthouse revealed a woman who'd built walls as high as her success. Grace's Seattle kitchen radiated the warmth of someone determined to heal what had been broken. Your father's email changes everything, Emma said, her prosecutor's mind already calculating angles. Mine's been dead for real. I attended his funeral 15 years ago. But Sarah, if James Chen survived, he's the key to exposing all of them. Isabella leaned into her camera, tech entrepreneur intensity blazing. The Morrison pattern isn't random. They target family businesses with valuable intellectual property, biotech, manufacturing, software, hospitality. Then they orchestrate scandals, buy assets cheap, and eliminate witnesses. But why keep the daughters? Asked, her therapist training evident in how she connected emotional dots. Insurance, Emma answered grimly. Can't have us growing up to seek revenge if we're grateful Morrison family members. Plus, perfect public relations. Look how generous they are, saving orphaned children. The video calls dissolved into tactical planning that felt surreal. 3 successful women I'd never met, scattered across continents, strategizing like generals preparing for war. But beneath the logistics lay something deeper. The recognition that we'd each spent decades feeling like outsiders in families that had never truly been ours. Lily doesn't know, the words escaped before self-censorship could stop them. She thinks she's marrying for love, but Marcus's investment firm specializes in hostile takeovers of Asian American businesses. This wedding isn't celebration, it's conquest. Grace's intake of breath was audible. They're using your sister as an unwitting weapon, which means we save her while exposing them, Isabella declared with the confidence of someone accustomed to solving impossible problems. Emma was already pulling up flight information. I can be in Boston by tomorrow night. Isabella, my jet can leave Miami within the hour. Grace nodded from Seattle. My practice can survive without me for a few days. But Sarah, meeting your father alone tonight has to happen. The decision crystallized with surprising clarity. He's been hiding for 20 years. Whatever he's planned, whatever evidence he's gathered, starts with me understanding the truth. Walking through Boston Common toward Newbury Street, every shadow seemed to hold threats. The autumn air carried the scent of dying leaves and new possibilities, where streetlights painted golden circles on sidewalks where normal people lived normal lives, blissfully unaware that some families were built on graveyards. Starbucks buzzed with typical evening energy, students cramming, couples arguing, business types pretending their phone calls were important. A man at a corner table caught my attention, not because he looked familiar, but because he was the only person in the entire cafe watching the door instead of a screen. Asian features that mirrored mine. Silver threading through black hair that had once been exactly my shade. Eyes that held 20 years of watching from shadows, waiting for this moment. He stood as I approached, and something in his posture, protective, proud, heartbroken, confirmed what my heart already knew. Hello, little star. Hello, Dad. We stared at each other across 20 years of stolen time until he gestured to the chair across from his. Sit, please. We have so much to discuss and very little time. As he opened a briefcase filled with documents, his next words changed everything. The wedding isn't in 6 days, Sarah. It's tomorrow. They moved it up because they know I'm here. Tomorrow? The word came out strangled, but the invitation said Saturday. They changed it this morning, Dad said, sliding a printed email across the small table. Emergency family meeting turned into emergency wedding. Your mother's been calling vendors all day, claiming a family medical emergency requires moving everything up. The email chain between Helen and the wedding planner revealed panic barely disguised as urgency. References to unexpected complications and family security concerns painted a picture of people running scared. They know you contacted me, he continued, opening the briefcase with hands that trembled slightly. Richard Morrison has had surveillance on you for months. Your phone, your emails, your foundation activities, all monitored. When you reached out to your sisters yesterday, alarms went off in very dangerous places. The documents he spread before me looked like evidence from a federal investigation. Bank transfers, shell company registrations, death certificates marked with coroner's notes that contradicted official causes. Emma's father hadn't died in a hunting accident. Ballistics reports showed wrong trajectory angles. Isabella's father's heart attack came with toxicology findings that suggested digitalis poisoning. Grace's father's car crash revealed brake lines cut with surgical precision. 3 murders made to look like accidents. Dad's voice carried the weight of someone who'd spent decades gathering proof. And 1 faked suicide, mine, orchestrated because your grandfather discovered Richard was skimming foundation money for personal investments. Grandfather Morrison knew about the murders? Harrison Morrison was many things, but he wasn't a killer. When he found out what his son had done, he threatened to expose everything unless Richard stopped. That's when they decided to fake my death and put you in witness protection disguised as adoption. The coffee shop noise faded into background static. Witness protection? But I was 3 years old. You saw Richard kill my business partner, David Liu, in our office. You were hiding under my desk during what was supposed to be a routine contract meeting. David was going to testify about the money laundering. You saw Richard inject something into David's coffee. Memory fragments crashed through mental barriers like waves against a crumbling seawall. A man falling down, someone screaming, strong arms lifting me from a dark space, the taste of my own tears. The Morrisons couldn't risk you remembering and talking later. Harrison proposed the adoption as protection. If you grew up Morrison, any future memories would seem like childhood fantasies. Richard agreed because it gave him leverage over me. Leverage how? Dad's smile held no warmth. They kept you as insurance. Any move against them, any attempt to surface or seek justice, and you'd pay the price. Harrison made sure you were loved and educated and successful, but always with the understanding that your safety depended on my continued silence. Phone buzzing broke the tension. Text from Lily, "Sarah, where are you? Emergency family meeting at 8 p.m. Mom says it's about wedding security concerns. She's acting really strange." Dad saw the message and cursed in what sounded like Mandarin. "They're accelerating everything. Your sisters, are they coming? Emma lands in 2 hours. Isabella's already airborne. Grace is driving through the night." Good, because tomorrow isn't just about stopping a wedding anymore. He pulled out one final document, FBI letterhead with official seals. It's about staying alive long enough to testify. The warrant was dated today, signed by a federal judge in the District of Massachusetts. Multiple charges: conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. Names listed included Richard Morrison, Charles Whitfield, and 6 other men whose signatures appeared on various documents throughout the briefcase. The FBI has been building this case for 15 years. Tomorrow, during the wedding ceremony, they're planning mass arrests. But Sarah, there's something else you need to know about why they moved up the timeline. He handed me a hospital admissions form dated 3 days ago. Harrison Morrison, my grandfather, the man I'd thought died peacefully in his sleep 5 years ago, was alive and scheduled for emergency surgery. He's been in hiding too, preparing his own testimony, but his heart is failing, and if he dies before the arrests, the case falls apart, finishing understanding what he couldn't say. Which is why, Dad said, standing and closing the briefcase, "We're going to that family meeting tonight. All of us, your sisters, me, and the federal agents who've been waiting 20 years for this moment." Outside, car headlights swept across the coffee shop windows like searching eyes, and Dad's face went rigid with recognition. "Sarah, we need to leave, now. That's Charles Whitfield's car, and he doesn't travel alone anymore." The back exit of Starbucks led through a maze of Boston's oldest alleyways, where brick buildings held secrets in their shadows, and Dad moved like someone who'd spent 20 years perfecting the art of disappearance. "The family meeting isn't at the Morrison house," he said, checking his phone as we hurried through narrow passages between Newbury Street boutiques. "It's at the Fairmont Copley Plaza, the same hotel where the wedding reception was supposed to be tomorrow." Supposed to be? They're combining everything into one event: meeting, ceremony, reception, and arrests. Your mother doesn't know it yet, but she's orchestrating the biggest sting operation in Massachusetts history. 3 blocks away, Dad pulled me into the doorway of a closed antique shop. Through the glass, Emma's reflection appeared like a guardian angel materializing from nowhere: tailored coat, determined expression, and eyes that held the same fire burning in my chest. "The London flight landed early," she said, embracing me with surprising warmth. "Isabella's 15 minutes out, and Grace is pulling into the city now. But James, we have a problem." Dad's face darkened. "What kind of problem?" "The kind where Marcus Whitfield just proposed to Lily 20 minutes ago, live on Channel 7 News, outside the hotel where the family meeting is happening. Cameras, reporters, the works. It wasn't planned. Charles forced his hand to create public pressure for going through with tomorrow's ceremony." The pieces clicked together with devastating clarity. They're backing Lily into a corner where she can't say no without humiliating herself publicly. "Worse," Emma continued, pulling up the news footage on her phone. "Look at what Marcus gave her." The engagement ring blazing on Lily's finger wasn't just any family heirloom. The distinctive sapphire surrounded by diamonds was one piece of a set that had once belonged to my mother, my real mother, James Chen's wife. "That ring was stolen from our house the night they faked my death." Dad's voice carried 20 years of controlled rage. "Your mother was wearing it when they took you away. It was her grandmother's, brought over from Shanghai in 1943. "They've been saving it for this moment," Emma said grimly. "Maximum psychological impact. When you see Lily wearing your birth mother's ring while marrying into the family that destroyed yours." The emotional manipulation was surgical in its precision. Every element designed to break me, to make me act rashly, to push me into making mistakes that would discredit my testimony. Isabella appeared from a taxi at the corner, her arrival as dramatic as everything else about her. Even in travel clothes, she commanded attention, and the phone pressed to her ear suggested she'd been working the entire flight. "Bad news first," she announced, joining our huddle. The FBI operation was compromised. Someone leaked the warrant details to Charles Whitfield 3 hours ago. The arrests were supposed to be simultaneous tomorrow morning, but now they know what's coming. "And the good news?" Dad asked. "Grace found something in her father's papers that changes everything. She's 5 minutes away and insists on showing us in person. But James, you're not going to like what she discovered about Harrison Morrison." Grace's rental car pulled up like clockwork, and she emerged carrying a file box that looked like it had survived several decades. Her calm demeanor couldn't mask the intensity burning in her eyes. "The Morrison Adoption Network isn't just about 4 daughters," she said, without preamble. "It's about 12. 12 daughters adopted into Morrison family branches across the country over 30 years, all children of businesses they destroyed, all raised to be grateful and loyal and uninformed." The revelation hit like a physical blow. Emma swayed against the antique shop window. Isabella cursed in what sounded like Spanish mixed with English. Dad's face went through several expressions before settling on something that looked like devastation mixed with relief. "But there's more," Grace continued, opening the box. "Harrison Morrison didn't just know about the murders. He's not the protective grandfather you thought, Sarah. He's the architect of everything. The man who's been hiding in that hospital, He's not dying from heart failure." She handed me a medical report that made my knees weak. "He's been in psychiatric evaluation for 3 months. Complete psychological break. The FBI finally got to him, and he's been confessing to crimes that go back 40 years. The Morrison Foundation was never about redemption. It was about creating an army of grateful daughters who would defend the family if the truth ever came out." Dad's phone buzzed with a text that drained all color from his face. "What is it?" Emma asked. "Message from Harrison Morrison himself," he said, voice hollow. "He wants to see Sarah tonight, before the arrests. He says there's one more daughter we don't know about." The final words of his text message glowed on the screen like a threat. "She's been at the family meeting all along." The Fairmont Copley Plaza's grand ballroom had been transformed into something between a wedding venue and a war room. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over round tables draped in ivory silk, while men in expensive suits spoke in hushed tones near the walls. Too many men, with too many bulges under their jackets, for this to be any normal family gathering. Helen Morrison stood at the room's center, like a conductor orchestrating her own downfall, directing hotel staff with the manic energy of someone who knew everything was about to collapse. She wore the same Chanel suit she'd worn to every major family crisis, armor disguised as elegance. "Sarah, thank God," she said, rushing toward me with arms outstretched. But her embrace felt hollow, desperate, like someone grasping for absolution she'd never receive. "We need to talk, all of us, as a family." Behind her, Lily sat at the head table, still wearing that sapphire ring, her wedding dress hanging on a portable rack like a ghost of tomorrow's plans. Marcus paced nearby, phone pressed to his ear, having what sounded like the most important conversation of his life. "Mom," the word felt strange on my tongue after everything. "Where is Grandfather Morrison?" Helen's face went through several expressions before settling on something that looked like grief mixed with terror. He's been staying in the presidential suite upstairs. The heart surgery was postponed because she struggled with words that clearly didn't want to come, because he's been having episodes, confusion, saying things that don't make sense." Dad stepped from behind me like a resurrection made flesh, and Helen's gasp echoed through the ballroom. Several suited men reached inside their jackets before recognizing that the moment they'd been hired to prevent was already happening. "Hello, Helen," Dad said, with the quiet dignity of someone who'd spent 2 decades preparing for this confrontation. "You look well." "James," her voice broke on his name. "You're supposed to be dead." "So are a lot of people, apparently, but here we are." Emma, Isabella, and Grace flanked me like an honor guard of justice, and Helen's eyes widened as she took in the family resemblance that couldn't be coincidental. The math was simple enough. 4 women who looked like sisters standing with the man they thought she'd helped destroy. "You brought them," Helen whispered. "You brought all of them." "Actually," Emma said with prosecutorial precision, "we brought ourselves. Turns out daughters of murdered fathers tend to find each other eventually." Marcus ended his phone call and approached with the careful movements of someone walking through a minefield. "Sarah, I just spoke with my father. He wants to cooperate with federal investigators. He's been carrying this guilt for 20 years. "And you?" Lily's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "How long have you been carrying guilt, Marcus?" "Since about 3 hours ago, when I learned that my inheritance was built on your sister's father's patents and 3 other men's deaths." Lily stood up slowly, the wedding dress swaying on its rack like an accusation. So, this whole relationship, our engagement, everything? Everything between us was real, Marcus said desperately, but everything around us was orchestrated. Sarah, your grandfather has been planning this confrontation for months. The wedding, the venue, even the timing, all designed to force a resolution. Hotel staff had stopped pretending to work and were watching the drama unfold with the fascination of people witnessing history. In the corner, a woman with a professional camera was documenting everything, though whether she was hired by the Morrisons or someone else remained unclear. "Where is he?" Dad asked Helen directly. "Where is Harrison Morrison?" "Suite 2012, she answered automatically, then seemed to realize what she'd done. "But James, you can't. The things he's been saying, the confessions, if the FBI records any of it, then justice finally gets served," Grace said simply. The elevator to the 20th floor felt like ascending to Judgment Day. Dad, my 3 sisters, and I rode in silence while Helen wrung her hands and Marcus stared at his phone as if it held answers to questions he'd never thought to ask. The presidential suite door stood slightly ajar, warm light spilling into the hallway like an invitation or a trap. Grandfather? The title felt heavy in my mouth as I pushed the door open. The man sitting in the wingback chair facing the windows looked smaller than the Harrison Morrison of my memories, frailer, but his eyes held the same shark intelligence that had both protected and manipulated me for 30 years. "Sarah, my dear girl," he said, "right on time. Please, all of you, come in. We have so much to discuss before tomorrow's performance." He gestured to a tea service laid out on the coffee table, and that's when I noticed the 5th teacup. "I've been expecting company," he said pleasantly, though I admit I wasn't entirely certain which daughter would arrive first. Which daughter? The question hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Grandfather Morrison's smile held secrets that made my skin crawl. Behind us, Helen had gone pale as winter moonlight, while Marcus gripped Lily's hand so tightly his knuckles showed white against his skin. "Oh, my dear Sarah," Grandfather continued, settling back in his chair with the satisfaction of someone finally able to reveal a masterwork. "Did you think you were the only Morrison granddaughter I've been cultivating? The foundation was just one part of a much larger design." Dad stepped forward, every muscle tense. "Harrison, enough games. The FBI is already building cases against Richard and Charles. Your empire is finished." "My empire?" Grandfather's laugh was soft, almost gentle. "James, you still don't understand. I haven't been building an empire. I've been building an army." He picked up an iPad from the side table and showed us a video call screen with multiple windows. 8 faces stared back at us. Women ranging from their 20s to 40s, all bearing unmistakable family resemblances, all sitting in what appeared to be private jets or luxury cars. "Meet the rest of your sisters," Grandfather said proudly. Morrison daughters scattered across the globe, all successful, all grateful, all completely unaware of each other until today. Victoria Morrison Sterling from Vancouver, Diana Morrison Chen from Hong Kong, the twins, Amanda and Alicia Morrison Volkov from Moscow, Catherine Morrison Dubois from Paris, Samantha Morrison Costa from Sao Paulo, and of course, Margaret Morrison Williams from Lagos. Each woman waved tentatively at the screen, confusion evident in their expressions. Emma grabbed my arm so hard her nails left marks. 12 adopted daughters, Grandfather continued with obvious pride. 12 brilliant women who've spent their lives proving that Morrison nurturing creates exceptional human beings. 12 women who will testify character evidence on behalf of the family when these unfortunate legal proceedings begin. You're insane, Isabella whispered. Am I? Or am I the only one who understood that family isn't about blood, it's about loyalty, gratitude, and shared purpose? Each of these women has been successful because of Morrison investment in their potential. Each owes their achievements to Morrison guidance and financial support. Grace stepped closer to the screen, studying the faces with clinical attention. Grandfather, these women don't know what you've done. They don't know about the murders, the destroyed families. Of course they don't. Just as you four didn't know until recently. Knowledge is a burden, my dear Grace. I've spent decades ensuring that burden fell only on those strong enough to bear it. Dad's voice carried controlled fury. You murdered their fathers, Harrison. You stole these children and raised them as trophies. I saved them from lives of mediocrity and gave them purpose. Look at what they've accomplished. Sarah runs a $50 million foundation. Emma prosecutes international crimes. Isabella revolutionizes technology. Grace heals broken minds. None of that would have been possible in their original circumstances. The video call participants were becoming agitated, clearly hearing fragments of conversation that painted disturbing pictures. Victoria from Vancouver leaned forward. Excuse me, Mr. Morrison, but what happened to our fathers? Grandfather's expression shifted, the grandfatherly mask slipping to reveal something calculating and cold. Your fathers, my dear children, were obstacles to a greater good. Sometimes, individual sacrifice serves collective benefit. You're talking about murder, Diana from Hong Kong said flatly. You're talking about killing our parents. I'm talking about creating 12 exceptional women who will change the world. The Morrison legacy lives through you, not through buildings or bank accounts. Lily had been silent throughout the exchange, but now she stood up with the regal bearing of someone who'd found her backbone. Grandfather, you're talking about slavery, emotional slavery. These women don't owe you gratitude for destroying their families. And you, dear Lily, are the 13th daughter, not adopted, but raised in the same tradition of Morrison excellence. Your wedding tomorrow isn't just a celebration, it's a demonstration. 12 adopted daughters, 1 biological granddaughter, all testament to Morrison family values. Helen finally found her voice. Father Morrison, the FBI knows everything. The warrants are already signed. This conversation is being recorded by federal agents in the next room. Grandfather's smile widened. Of course it is, Helen. Did you think I hadn't planned for this moment? Every word spoken here tonight will be presented as evidence of my deteriorating mental state. Elderly man with dementia, making wild claims about events he no longer remembers clearly. He pulled out a medical report with multiple psychiatric signatures, 3 months of documented cognitive decline. Testimony from a confused old man hardly constitutes evidence of criminal conspiracy. Dad moved toward him with deliberate steps, but testimony from his living victims does. And James Chen is very much alive, very much sane, and very much ready to put you in prison for the rest of your life. Are you, James? Grandfather's eyes glittered with triumph. Because I have something that might change your perspective on justice versus family. He pressed a button on his chair, and a hidden panel in the wall slid open, revealing a woman who'd been listening to everything. Asian features, gentle eyes, wearing a simple blue dress that somehow managed to look both elegant and familiar. Dad went rigid, his face cycling through expressions of disbelief, hope, and terror. "Hello," the woman said softly. "I've missed you." The woman I'd thought was dead for 35 years stepped into the room, and Dad collapsed into the nearest chair like a man whose world had just been rewritten. "Sarah, darling," my mother said, turning toward me with tears streaming down her face, "you look exactly like I dreamed you would." The woman who gave birth to me moved across the room like a prayer finally answered, and suddenly 35 years of wondering what love actually felt like crystallized into one perfect moment of recognition. "Mom?" The word came out broken, barely a whisper, but she heard it above the chaos of voices and video calls and Grandfather Morrison's calculated manipulations. Her arms wrapped around me with the fierce protectiveness of someone who'd spent decades dreaming of this embrace, and everything else, the FBI, the murders, the empire built on bones, faded into background noise. She smelled like jasmine and hope and all the lullabies I'd forgotten I remembered. "My little star," she whispered against my hair, using Dad's pet name with the authority of someone who'd coined it first. I never stopped believing this day would come. Dad stood slowly, moving toward us like a man walking through a miracle he was afraid might disappear. When his arms encircled both of us, the broken family I'd grieved my entire life suddenly became whole in a way that transcended the hotel suite, the watching eyes, the weight of 35 years of carefully orchestrated lies. "How?" the question came from Emma, ever the prosecutor, cutting through the emotion with practical necessity. "Harrison Morrison said you died of cancer 10 years ago." Mom pulled back just enough to look at all of us, her daughter, her husband, the 4 women who'd become accidental sisters through shared tragedy. Cancer was real. Death was creatively interpreted. Harrison needed me alive to control James, but he needed the world to believe I was gone to control you, Sarah. "Another performance," Grace said, with the weary understanding of someone who'd spent her career untangling family deceptions. Like the suicide, like the adoptions, like everything. Grandfather Morrison watched our reunion with the satisfaction of a chess master revealing his final gambit. Mei Lin agreed to the charade because it guaranteed Sarah's safety and success. A dead mother poses no threat to carefully constructed family dynamics. "But a living mother," Mom said, her voice gaining strength as she faced the man who'd held her captive through emotional blackmail for a decade, "can testify about every conversation, every order, every murder you orchestrated to build your empire of stolen daughters." The video call screen still showed 8 confused faces, 8 women beginning to understand that their entire lives had been built on their fathers' graves. Victoria from Vancouver was crying openly. Diana from Hong Kong had her phone out, apparently calling lawyers. The twins from Moscow were speaking rapid Russian that sounded like planning rather than grieving. "Ladies," Dad addressed the screen with gentle authority, "you have choices to make. You can continue living the lives Harrison Morrison designed for you, grateful and uninformed, or you can join us in building something better from the ashes of what he destroyed." "What he destroyed includes my father," Amanda from Moscow said clearly. "I choose justice." One by one, the other women voiced similar sentiments. 8 more daughters choosing truth over comfort, reality over the beautiful lies they'd been raised to believe. Helen had been watching the dissolution of everything she'd married into with the stunned expression of someone witnessing a natural disaster. "Father Morrison, the FBI is waiting downstairs. If you confess now, publicly, they might consider your age and condition." "My condition is perfect clarity," Grandfather replied, "and my confession is this: I regret nothing. 12 brilliant women exist because of my vision. Hundreds of thousands of children have been helped by the foundation Sarah runs. Sometimes great good requires difficult choices. Murder isn't a difficult choice, Lily said with quiet steel. It's evil. And raising stolen children as trophies isn't vision, it's monstrous. Marcus stepped beside her, finally finding his voice. My father wants to make amends. He's already transferred ownership of Whitfield Capital to a trust managed by representatives of the families you destroyed. It won't bring back the dead, but it might help the living. Mom looked at Helen with something that might have been compassion. You have a choice too, Helen. You can keep protecting a man who's poisoned everything he's touched, or you can help us heal what he's broken. What would healing look like? Helen asked, her voice small and lost. Truth, Emma said simply. Full cooperation with federal investigators, complete financial transparency, and maybe, if you're very lucky, forgiveness from the daughters you helped raise in ignorance. The door opened to admit FBI agents who'd apparently heard enough. They moved with professional courtesy, reading rights to a man who listened with the serene expression of someone who'd always known this moment would arrive. As they led Grandfather Morrison away, he paused beside me. Sarah, my dear, you'll understand someday that love and protection sometimes require terrible compromises. Everything I did was to give you the life you deserved. Grandfather, the title felt like ashes in my mouth. The life I deserved was the one you stole, with my real parents, in my real family. What you gave me was beautiful and successful and completely hollow. He nodded as if that response satisfied him somehow. Then build something better, my dear. You have the tools I gave you and the truth your parents preserved. Make it count. 6 months later, the Chen Family Foundation occupied the same offices that had once housed Harrison Morrison's empire of guilt and gratitude. Emma had moved back from London to serve as legal counsel. Isabella relocated her tech company to Boston to manage digital security. Grace opened a family therapy practice specializing in adoption trauma and corporate family destruction. The 12 sisters, as we'd come to call ourselves, met quarterly to coordinate efforts across 6 continents. Victoria was exposing Canadian mining corruption. Diana had revolutionized Hong Kong's financial fraud detection. The Moscow twins were prosecuting oligarchs who'd used Morrison tactics in Russia. Each of us healing the world by healing the wounds Harrison Morrison had inflicted. Mom and Dad remarried in a small ceremony at Hope Harbor Children's Center, surrounded by kids who understood that sometimes families break apart and find each other again in unexpected ways. They'd bought a house in Cambridge where the guest room stayed ready for any of the 12 daughters who needed a place to remember what real family felt like. Helen served 18 months in minimum security and now worked full-time for our foundation, using her social connections to identify other families who needed help escaping corporate predators. Her transformation wasn't complete, might never be, but it was genuine. Lily and Marcus had their real wedding on the anniversary of the night everything came apart, in a small chapel with only people who loved them for who they were rather than what they represented. Their daughter, Emma Chen Morrison Whitfield, carried both our grandfather's name and my father's, a bridge between the family that had destroyed and the family that had survived. Standing in my office, looking out over Boston Harbor, where ships carried people toward new beginnings, the text that had started everything felt like ancient history, but Helen's words still echoed, "You're not coming to the wedding." She'd been right, in a way. I hadn't come to the wedding she'd planned, the performance designed to cement Harrison Morrison's legacy of beautiful lies. Instead, I'd come to the truth, And sometimes the truth is the most beautiful wedding gift of all. 2 years later, the invitation arrived on cream-colored paper with elegant calligraphy that spoke of new beginnings rather than old wounds. The Chen Family Foundation cordially invites you to the first annual Truth and Reconciliation Gala, celebrating families rebuilt from courage, love, and the revolutionary power of choosing authenticity over appearances. The event would honor not just our 12 sisters, but the hundreds of families who'd found the strength to expose corporate predators, leave toxic relationships, and rebuild their lives on foundations of truth rather than convenience. What had started as one excluded daughter's quest for justice had become a movement of women choosing themselves over the comfortable lies others wanted them to live. Standing before the mirror in my childhood bedroom, now transformed into a space that reflected who I'd become rather than who Harrison Morrison had wanted me to be, the woman looking back bore little resemblance to the grateful adoptee who'd once measured her worth by other people's approval. Mom knocked softly before entering, carrying a jewelry box that had traveled from Shanghai to Boston to witness protection and finally home again. "These belonged to your great-grandmother," she said, opening it to reveal jade earrings that caught the light like captured wisdom. She always said they should be worn by women brave enough to honor their ancestors while creating their own paths. The earrings felt warm against my skin, connecting me to generations of women who'd survived upheaval and displacement to give their daughters chances at lives they could only dream of. But unlike Harrison Morrison's version of opportunity, built on others' destruction, this inheritance came with no debt except the obligation to pass courage forward. Downstairs, Dad waited in his best suit, the one he'd never had occasion to wear during 20 years of hiding. His smile held pride that had nothing to do with my achievements and everything to do with the woman I'd chosen to become when everything safe and familiar had been stripped away. "Ready to change some more lives?" he asked, offering his arm. The ballroom, where everything had once fallen apart, now sparkled with the energy of people who'd chosen healing over hatred, truth over comfort, and each other over the systems designed to keep them grateful and silent. Emma introduced legislation inspired by our story. Isabella's tech platform connected displaced families worldwide. Grace's therapy model was being taught in universities across 3 continents. But perhaps the most powerful transformation belonged to the audience itself. Women who'd come expecting inspiration and left with permission to examine their own lives, their own families, their own willingness to accept less than they deserved simply because someone else's comfort depended on their silence. Because here's what Harrison Morrison never understood about stolen daughters: we don't stay stolen forever. Sometimes we find each other, sometimes we find our voices, and sometimes, when we're very lucky and very brave, we find the strength to rewrite not just our own stories, but the stories of every woman who comes after us. So here's my question for you. What family lie are you still protecting because the truth feels too dangerous to speak? What relationship, what job, what version of yourself are you maintaining because someone else needs you to stay small, grateful, and quiet? Because I promise you this, somewhere out there, your real family is waiting. The people who will love you for who you are, not who they need you to be. You just have to be brave enough to cancel everything that isn't serving your truth. And then you get to find out what comes next.